This story is titled, My Name is Marcus Thompson, and I'm 29 years old. Until recently, I thought I had a solid marriage, but my delusional wife apparently thought I'd just sit around while she played house with another guy. She actually suggested we pretend we're not married for a while. Those were her exact words. I mean, seriously, how old is she, 12? Well, while she was off hooking up with someone else, I secured everything important and served her with divorce papers. Here's exactly how it all went down. I'm a 29-year-old male, and I met Vanessa when I was 24. She's 28 now, and we'd been married for 3 years with a total relationship spanning 5 years. I work as a certified HVAC technician, and I pull down solid money working on commercial construction projects. It's demanding work, but it pays well, and I'm good at what I do. Vanessa works as a receptionist at some mid-size firm downtown, making roughly half of what I earn annually. One thing that turned out to be crucial later on. The house we lived in was mine alone. I had bought it 2 years before we got married using money from an inheritance I'd received. I was smart enough to keep the title solely in my name, which meant it remained my separate property throughout our marriage. We split the household expenses roughly 70-30 since I made about double her salary, which seemed fair to both of us at the time. She contributed to groceries, utilities, and various home improvements over the years, but the mortgage payments were always my responsibility alone. The first 2 years of our marriage felt pretty normal and solid. We went through all the typical newlywed adjustments, figuring out whose turn it was to do the dishes, constantly arguing about the thermostat settings, and planning vacations we couldn't quite afford yet. She always wanted to go to Europe for our trips, while I was more focused on paying down the mortgage faster and building our financial security. It was just the standard adjustment period that most couples go through when they're learning to live together as husband and wife. The house itself is a 1960s ranch-style home that I completely renovated myself over the course of 2 years. I pulled all the necessary permits and did most of the electrical and plumbing work during weekends and evenings after my regular job. I added a full workshop in the garage, refinished all the original hardwood floors throughout the house, and completely updated the kitchen with quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances. Between materials and my own labor, I put approximately $45,000 and 2 years of serious sweat equity into the property. The current market value sits around $320,000, and the neighborhood has been gentrifying rapidly, which means the investment was paying off nicely. Things started shifting in our marriage about 8 months ago, and it all began when Vanessa reconnected with her college friend Brianna. Brianna had just moved back to town after going through what she described as a messy divorce. She didn't have any kids to worry about, and she was collecting $2,800 a month in alimony from some tech guy who had apparently cheated on her during their brief marriage. With all that free money coming in, she was living in a trendy downtown loft, hitting the bars every single weekend, and constantly posting Instagram stories about living your best life and not settling for less than you deserve. My best friend Tyler immediately nicknamed her the Life Coach after meeting her just once at a barbecue we hosted. Tyler has been my wingman since our college days. He's a cybersecurity specialist who's brutally honest and has absolutely zero patience for drama or bullshit. He also happens to be hilarious in the darkest possible way, which makes him great company when you need someone to cut through the nonsense. Tyler took one look at Brianna's designer handbag and obviously fake eyelashes and called the situation immediately. He could see trouble coming from a mile away. Brianna was 26 years old with bleached blonde hair, and she was one of those women who thinks having a loud opinion about absolutely everything makes her interesting and sophisticated. What made me uncomfortable from the start was how she always smiled a little too long at me whenever we talked, and she laughed way too hard at my jokes, even the ones that weren't particularly funny. At the time, I chalked it up to just extrovert energy and didn't think much more about it. Looking back now, I should have known better and trusted my instincts. She would roll up to our house in her leased Audi, always dressed like she was heading to a nightclub instead of just hanging out with friends. She constantly had some new piece of relationship advice that sounded like it came straight from a daytime talk show or one of those toxic self-help books. The woman was basically a walking red flag factory when you really think about it. Here she was, divorced after only 18 months of marriage, with no real job skills beyond spending someone else's money. And she had this kind of toxic positivity that made normal, grounded people want to jump off bridges. But somehow, she had completely captured Vanessa's attention and trust. Suddenly, Vanessa started coming home with all these new ideas about relationships and what marriage should look like. She began complaining that we were too comfortable with each other, and that marriage shouldn't feel like roommates just going through the motions. She started talking about how successful couples challenge each other and keep the spark alive, and other recycled garbage that was clearly coming from whatever relationship podcast Brianna had discovered that particular week. It was obvious that all of these concepts were being fed to her by someone else, because they didn't sound like anything Vanessa would have come up with on her own. The fights between Vanessa and me started small at first, but they followed a predictable pattern that became increasingly frustrating. She would ask questions like why I didn't plan more spontaneous dates for us, or why I was always working late, or why I didn't get jealous when other guys talked to her at parties. It was classic manufactured drama, the kind of stuff that creates problems where none existed before, but I didn't recognize what was happening at the time. I thought these were legitimate concerns that I should address, rather than seeing them for what they really were. Artificial relationship tests designed to create conflict. The timing of all this couldn't have been worse for me professionally. I was working on a major commercial project, a 15-story office complex downtown that was already 3 months behind schedule, and a staggering $250,000 over budget when I inherited it. This was the kind of job that makes or breaks careers in my field, and I knew that if I could bring it back on track, it would set me up for serious advancement in the company. I was putting in 65-hour weeks regularly, and sometimes I had to work Saturdays just to keep up with the demanding schedule. I was trying everything I could to keep the project from becoming a complete disaster. But according to Brianna's twisted relationship philosophy that she was feeding to my wife, my commitment to keeping us financially stable and advancing my career was actually proof that I didn't care about our marriage. You honestly can't make this stuff up. Here I was, working my ass off to provide for our future, and somehow that was being twisted into evidence that I was a neglectful husband. The logic was completely backwards, but Vanessa was buying into it completely. By February, we were fighting at least twice a week, and the arguments always followed the exact same exhausting pattern. Vanessa would pick something minor and seemingly insignificant, then escalate it into a full character assassination where everything I did was wrong. When I didn't engage with the hysteria and drama, she would act confused and hurt, as if my calm response was somehow proof of my indifference. I would try to approach the situation logically and work toward a solution, but she would immediately accuse me of being emotionally unavailable and incapable of understanding her feelings. The Valentine's Day fight was particularly ridiculous and really showed me how far things had deteriorated. I had worked a grueling 13-hour day dealing with structural engineers and city inspectors who were breathing down my neck about code compliance issues. I came home completely exhausted, and Vanessa was upset that I didn't seem excited enough about the roses she had bought for the house. Note that she wasn't upset that I didn't like them. She was upset that I didn't seem excited enough about them. The level of emotional performance she was expecting from me was completely unreasonable given the circumstances. Tyler summed up the entire situation perfectly when I vented to him about it. She's manufacturing problems because her divorced friend told her that marriage should feel like a reality TV show, he said. You're dealing with someone who's been convinced that drama equals passion, and that if you're not constantly fighting and making up, then something must be wrong. His assessment was spot on, but at the time I was still hoping we could work through it. I started working even later hours, and while part of it was genuinely because of the project deadline pressures, I'll admit that most of it was because home had started to feel like walking through a minefield. Every conversation was a potential argument, and I never knew what innocent comment or action would set off the next round of manufactured drama. Vanessa took my increased work hours as proof that I didn't care about our marriage, which created a classic catch-22 situation where I couldn't win no matter what I did. What I didn't realize at the time was that Brianna wasn't just poisoning my wife's head with relationship advice and manufactured drama. She was actively encouraging Vanessa to explore other options outside of our marriage. This was a calculated campaign to destroy what we had built together, and I was completely blind to it until it was too late to stop the damage. The breaking point finally came on a Tuesday evening in March that I'll never forget. I got home around 7:30 p.m., which wasn't even that late considering the project demands I was dealing with. When I walked through the front door, I found Vanessa sitting at our kitchen table, looking like she had been rehearsing something all day long. Her posture was stiff, her expression was serious, and there was an air of determination about her that immediately put me on edge. She had already eaten dinner without me, which was completely new behavior for us. We had always made it a point to wait for each other, even if it meant eating at 9 or 10 p.m. after a long day. It was one of those small traditions that couples develop over time, and the fact that she had abandoned it without any discussion felt like a deliberate message. We need to talk, she said in a tone that every married person recognizes as the beginning of something serious. I grabbed some leftover pizza from the refrigerator and sat down across from her at the table. The pepperoni was cold and had that slightly rubbery texture that pizza gets when it's been sitting around too long. But I was hungry enough that I didn't particularly care about the temperature. "I've been thinking about us, about where we're headed as a couple," she began, clearly working from a script she had prepared in advance. "I think we should take a break from each other." I stopped eating and looked up at her, trying to process what she had just said. "A break? Not anything permanent," she continued quickly, as if she was trying to soften the blow. "Just a week or two to see how we feel when we're apart. To remember why we fell in love in the first place and what we mean to each other." I knew exactly where this idea was coming from, and it wasn't from Vanessa's own thoughts or feelings. Brianna had been feeding her this exact line for months, always talking about how her ex-husband never appreciated her until she left him, and how absence makes the heart grow fonder. It was textbook manipulation disguised as relationship wisdom. The thing is, I had heard this exact conversation before from other people in my life. My buddy Kevin had gone through the same thing just 2 years earlier. His wife had wanted a break to find herself, and she found herself all right, in bed with her yoga instructor. That little adventure ended up costing Kevin half of his 401k and $1,900 a month in child support payments. The pattern was always the same. Someone convinces a married person that they need space to appreciate what they have, when really it's just an excuse to test drive other options without the guilt of outright cheating. "You want to separate?" I asked, making sure I understood what she was proposing. "I want us to pretend we're not married for a little while," she replied. "See if we miss each other. See if you'll actually fight for us and show me that this relationship matters to you." And there it was, the real agenda behind this whole charade. This wasn't about taking space or rediscovering our connection. This was about making me dance for her attention, making me prove my love through panic and desperation. She wanted me to beg, to chase after her, to make grand gestures that would validate her sense of importance and desirability. It was an elaborate test designed to feed her ego at the expense of our marriage. I looked at my wife of 3 years, sitting there across from me with her carefully rehearsed speech and her manipulation tactics that she had clearly learned from her train wreck of a friend. Something inside me just went completely cold in that moment. Instead of arguing with her or begging her to reconsider, I just shrugged my shoulders and said, "Okay." She blinked in obvious surprise. "Okay?" she repeated, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. "If that's what you want," I replied calmly, and then went back to eating my leftover pizza like she had just asked me to pick up milk on the way home from work tomorrow. The disappointment on her face was immediate and unmistakable. She had clearly expected me to argue with her, to beg her not to leave, to make some kind of grand romantic gesture that would prove how much I needed her. Instead, I just nodded and continued eating my dinner as if her dramatic announcement was no big deal. The deflation in her expression told me everything I needed to know about her true motivations. That's when I knew our marriage was probably over. And it wasn't because of the break request itself. It was because she was genuinely disappointed that I didn't fight her on it. She wanted drama and conflict more than she wanted to actually fix whatever problems we might have had. She was more interested in creating a scene than in having a real conversation about our relationship. I sent a text message to Tyler immediately after Vanessa went to bed that night. "Vanessa wants to take a marriage break," I wrote. His response came back within 30 seconds. "LOL. Let me guess, the life coach's idea?" When I confirmed his suspicion, he asked, "What's your move?" I replied, "Going to let her have her break, see what happens." Tyler's response was perfect. Smart. Nothing says "I love you" like manufactured relationship tests. It turned out that Tyler was being optimistic about the timeline of how things would unfold. We established the ground rules for our break that same night. 2 weeks of acting like we weren't married to each other. She would stay with Brianna at her downtown loft, and we would have no contact except for house-related business or genuine emergencies. After 14 days, we would supposedly reassess our feelings and decide whether we wanted to work on our marriage or not. Vanessa packed 2 large suitcases the next morning, taking mostly her work clothes and enough casual outfits to last her for 2 weeks. I actually helped her load the luggage into her Honda Accord and stood in the driveway watching her drive away. The whole scene felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart instead of my own. The house felt different immediately after she left, but not in the way I had expected. It was quieter, sure, but not in a depressing or lonely way. For the first time in months, I could watch SportsCenter without having to listen to commentary about how sports represent toxic masculinity in modern society. I could eat cereal for dinner without someone analyzing the deeper psychological meaning of my nutritional choices. For the first time in what felt like forever, I actually relaxed in my own living room without walking on eggshells. That first night alone, I ordered a large pizza from my favorite place, cracked open a cold beer, and watched the entire Terminator trilogy without anyone explaining why action movies perpetuate harmful stereotypes about violence and masculinity. It was absolutely glorious. I hadn't realized how much stress I had been carrying around until it was suddenly gone. Tyler came over that first weekend with takeout from this Mexican place we'd been going to since our college days. He brought his laptop along, and we spent 3 hours setting up a fantasy baseball league for the upcoming season. It was something I hadn't even had time to think about in months because every free moment at home had been consumed by relationship drama and manufactured conflicts. "So, how's the single life treating you?" Tyler asked me with a grin while we were setting up our fantasy league rosters. "Pretty good, actually," I replied honestly. "I watched 3 hours of basketball yesterday without anyone explaining why sports are a symptom of male emotional repression and an inability to process feelings in a healthy way." Tyler nearly choked on his burrito when I said that. "She actually said that to you?" he asked, still coughing slightly. "Among other things," I confirmed. Apparently, my interest in watching the Heat's playoff run was somehow preventing me from processing my emotions in a mature and constructive manner. The absurdity of it all was almost funny now that I had some distance from the constant criticism. That same weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through our finances with a fine-tooth comb. I pulled up our joint checking account, our shared savings account, both of our credit card statements, and even her student loan information that I had been helping her pay off. I started carefully documenting every shared asset and debt we had accumulated during our marriage. The numbers were interesting when I laid them all out. We had approximately $38,000 in our joint savings account that we had been building up over the past 3 years. There was another $16,000 sitting in our joint checking account from recent paychecks and normal monthly expenses. Her student loan balance was still sitting at $31,000 for a marketing degree that had landed her a $48,000 per year job, answering phones and scheduling appointments for executives. I had been throwing an extra $450 a month at that loan for the past 2 years, trying to get it paid off faster so we could redirect that money toward building our future together. I also took the time to carefully document all the house improvements we had made together since getting married. She had contributed approximately $9,000 toward materials and appliances over the course of our 3-year marriage, mostly for the kitchen renovation project we had tackled together. Meanwhile, I had done all the actual labor myself and had put in another $36,000 of my own money for various improvements and upgrades throughout the house. Monday morning, I called Carter. Not to file anything official yet, but just to understand what my options would be if things went south with this whole break experiment. Carter is a divorce attorney that my cousin had recommended after his own messy split a few years back. Carter walked me through Florida divorce law in detail, explaining how asset division typically works and what I could realistically expect if we ended up going down that road. The good news was that the house would almost certainly stay mine since it was separate property that I had acquired before our marriage. The improvements we had made together were a bit more complicated legally, but since I had done all the actual work myself and had contributed the vast majority of the money for materials, I would likely keep most of the added value from those projects. By the end of the first week, I had moved half of our joint savings into a separate account under my name only. This was completely legal since it was marital property and I had equal access to those funds. I also changed my direct deposit to go into my individual checking account instead of our joint account. I wasn't being vindictive, I was just being smart and protecting myself in case this break turned into something more permanent. Vanessa texted me exactly once during that first week. The message was short and seemed designed to test my emotional state. "Hope you're thinking about us." I showed the text to Tyler when he came over to watch the game that night. "What do you think that means?" I asked him. His analysis was brutally accurate. "It means the life coach told her you'd be a sobbing mess by now, begging her to come home. Instead, you're probably the most relaxed you've been in months." Must be confusing for both of them. By the 10th day of our supposed marriage break, Brianna had apparently decided that 2 weeks was more than enough time for her to make her move on me. She had clearly been waiting for what she thought would be the perfect moment to swoop in and position herself as the obvious upgrade from my emotionally confused wife. On a Wednesday afternoon, I received a text message from a phone number I didn't have saved in my contacts. "Hey, how are you holding up?" the message read. We had never texted one-on-one before, so I knew immediately who it had to be. I decided to keep my response short but friendly to see what her angle would be. "Doing okay. This whole thing is weird," I replied. Her response came back quickly. "I know, right? Vanessa's been so stressed about everything. Maybe we could grab coffee and talk about it sometime?" I could practically see the manipulation wheels turning in her head. Instead of shutting down her suggestion immediately, I decided to play along and see exactly what her game plan was. "Yeah, maybe that would help," I responded, keeping things vague and non-committal. We arranged to meet on Friday evening at a Starbucks near her apartment complex downtown. She showed up dressed like she was planning to hit the clubs afterward, rather than having a casual coffee with her friend's husband during a marriage crisis. She was wearing a tight red dress that left very little to the imagination, full makeup that looked like it had taken her an hour to apply, and enough perfume to choke a horse. This was supposedly a supportive conversation between friends, but her outfit suggested she had very different intentions. The dress was cut low enough in the front that I could see way more than I needed to see every time she leaned forward across the small table to grab her latte. And she seemed to lean forward quite frequently throughout our conversation, making sure I got a good view of what she was offering. Her subtlety was about as sophisticated as a neon billboard advertising her availability. "I feel terrible about this whole situation," she said, making sure to lean forward across the table yet again. "You guys were so good together, and I hate seeing you both go through this." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me, considering she had spent the past 8 months systematically poisoning my wife's mind against our marriage. "Were we, though?" I asked, playing the confused and hurt husband perfectly. "I mean, all the fighting we've been doing lately makes me wonder if we were as solid as I thought." This was exactly the opening she had been waiting for. "That's just her being confused and not knowing what she really wants," Brianna said, reaching across the table to touch my hand in what was supposed to be a comforting gesture. "But I can see how much this whole thing is hurting you, and it breaks my heart." Her nails were done in some dark purple color that probably cost $60 at one of those high-end nail salons. It was the kind of expensive maintenance routine that requires weekly appointments and screams high-maintenance lifestyle. I let her keep physical contact for a few seconds before casually pulling my hand back, not wanting to seem too eager or too resistant. "It's been really rough," I admitted, maintaining my act as the devastated husband. "You know, if you ever need someone to talk to about any of this, I'm here day or night," she said, her voice taking on a breathy quality that was supposed to sound seductive. "I mean that. Anytime you need support or just want to vent about everything that's happening." The conversation continued for about an hour, and she spent most of that time talking about how I deserved so much better than what I was getting from Vanessa. She went on about how my wife didn't appreciate what she had in me, and how if she were married to someone like me, things would be completely different. The woman was essentially auditioning for the role of replacement wife right there in Starbucks. When we finally got up to leave, she hugged me much longer than was necessary or appropriate for the situation. Her body was pressed against mine, and she made sure the embrace lasted long enough to send a clear message about her intentions. "This was really nice," she said as we separated. "We should definitely do this again soon." I drove home that evening and immediately called Tyler to fill him in on what had just happened. "Dude, you're not going to believe this," I said as soon as he picked up the phone. "Let me guess," Tyler replied without missing a beat. "The life coach is already shopping for wedding dresses and picking out china patterns?" "She basically threw herself at me," I told him, still somewhat amazed by her brazenness. "Dress cut down to her navel, constantly touching my hands across the table, talking about how I deserve so much better than what I'm getting. The woman has the patience of a hungry shark circling wounded prey." "Of course she does," Tyler said, and I could hear him typing on his keyboard in the background. The guy was probably debugging code while simultaneously analyzing my marriage drama. She probably had this entire plan mapped out before she even suggested the break idea to Vanessa in the first place. It's like a 3-step program for home wrecking. Convince the wife to leave, comfort the abandoned husband, then move in for the kill. "What do you think I should do about it?" I asked, genuinely curious about his take on the situation. "Play dumb and let her think she's being subtle while you document everything that happens," he advised. "This whole thing is going to get very interesting very quickly, and you're going to want evidence of her behavior when the dust settles." Over the next few days, Brianna ramped up her contact with me significantly. I started receiving daily text messages asking how I was holding up and whether I needed someone to talk to. She began suggesting that we should meet again soon, and she started sending me photos with captions like, "Thinking of you during this difficult time," and "Hope you're taking care of yourself." The photos she sent were obviously calculated and designed to get a reaction from me. There was one of her at the gym wearing tight yoga pants and a sports bra, another of her at some upscale restaurant with the caption, "Eating alone again. Wish I had better company," and one of her lounging by the pool at her apartment complex, wearing a bikini that barely qualified as clothing. Each image was carefully crafted to remind me of what was supposedly available if I played my cards right and made the obvious choice. Tyler was having an absolute field day analyzing her messages when I showed them to him. "Look at this one," he said, reading from my phone with obvious amusement. "I hope you know how special you are and that someone out there sees your worth." He shook his head in disbelief. "What is she? A greeting card? Next, she'll be sending you inspirational quotes about following your heart and embracing new beginnings." I responded to her messages just enough to keep her interested and engaged, but not enough to cross any actual lines or give her false hope. I wanted to seem vulnerable and receptive to her attention without appearing too eager or too resistant. It was a delicate balance, but I needed to maintain the illusion that her strategy was working. That's when Brianna decided it was time to make her real move and drop what she thought would be the bombshell that would drive me straight into her arms. On Saturday evening, I received a text message that was different from her usual check-ins. "I have something important to tell you, but I don't know if I should. It's really weighing on me." "What is it?" I replied, playing along with her dramatic setup. "Can we meet in person?" "This isn't the kind of thing I can say over text," she responded. The stage was clearly set for whatever revelation she had been planning to deliver. We met at the same Starbucks location where we had our previous conversation. This time she looked genuinely nervous, constantly checking her phone like she was expecting someone to call or text her with urgent news. She seemed agitated in a way that was completely different from her usual confident and predatory demeanor. "I feel absolutely terrible about this, but I think you deserve to know the truth about what's really going on," she said, taking a deep breath like she was about to deliver devastating news that would change everything. "Vanessa hasn't been honest with you about what she's been doing during this break." I let what I hoped was the appropriate level of shock and concern show on my face. "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward slightly to show that she had my complete attention. "Vanessa's been seeing someone else," she said, watching my reaction carefully. "His name is Derek, and she met him at some work conference last month. I've been watching them together, and I can tell you that whatever is happening between them definitely isn't innocent." Derek, according to Brianna's detailed description, was a marketing director from Orlando who was in his mid-30s. He was divorced, drove a Tesla, and worked for some tech company that she couldn't quite remember the name of. He sounded like exactly the kind of guy who probably had a LinkedIn profile photo of himself pointing at a whiteboard while wearing an expensive suit and a confident smile. "You're absolutely sure about this?" I asked, making sure to inject the right amount of devastation and disbelief into my voice. I needed her to believe that this information was completely shocking to me and that I had no idea what had been going on behind my back. "I saw them together at dinner last night, and they were being very cozy with each other," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand in what was supposed to be a comforting gesture. "And she's been lying to me about where she goes when she leaves my apartment. She'll say she's going to Target or meeting up with some work friends, but I know that's not where she's really going." Brianna leaned closer and squeezed my hand tighter. "I'm so sorry to have to tell you this because I know how much it must hurt to hear. But you needed to know the truth about what she's been doing while asking you to wait around for her like some kind of backup plan." The message she was sending couldn't have been clearer if she had handed me a business card advertising her services. I had two obvious options in front of me. I could fight for a cheating wife who didn't appreciate what she had, or I could upgrade to her loyal friend who would never betray me the way Vanessa had. What an amazing coincidence that she was conveniently available and interested. I played the role of the devastated husband absolutely perfectly. "I can't believe she would actually do this to me," I said, allowing my voice to crack slightly with emotion. "After everything we've built together, after all the years we've been married, I never thought she would be capable of something like this." "You don't deserve any of this," Brianna said, moving her chair closer to mine so she could provide more intimate comfort. "You deserve someone who actually values you and appreciates everything you bring to a relationship. Someone who would never dream of treating you this way." I went home that night and did something I probably should have done weeks earlier, but I had been trying to give Vanessa the benefit of the doubt and respect her privacy. I decided to check our shared devices and accounts to see what I could find out about her activities during our supposed break. Vanessa had left her iPad at home when she moved out temporarily, and it was still logged into her iCloud account with the password saved from when I had helped her set it up several months earlier. Her text messages were configured to sync automatically to all of her Apple devices, which meant I could see every conversation she had been having on her phone. What I discovered was 3 weeks' worth of conversations with Derek that told the complete story of their relationship. The messages started out innocent enough. Just work industry gossip and complaints about some difficult client who couldn't make up his mind about branding colors and marketing strategies. But by the second week, the conversation had turned much more personal, with Vanessa sharing complaints about our marriage and how she felt unappreciated and taken for granted. She talked about how her conversations with Derek reminded her what it felt like to be truly desired by someone. The most recent messages were explicitly romantic and sexual in nature. There were detailed plans for secret meetings, lengthy discussions about their emotional and physical connection, and photos that I definitely didn't want to see or think about. The timestamps on these messages showed that she had been actively texting and planning meetups with Derek throughout our entire marriage break, including right after she had sent me that manipulative message about hoping I was thinking about us. I took screenshots of everything I found and backed them up to my personal cloud storage account. In total, I documented 52 messages over the course of 3 weeks, including about a dozen photos and several voice messages that I didn't have the stomach to listen to. The evidence was overwhelming and completely damning. Then I decided to check our joint credit card statements online to see if there were any financial records that would support what I was finding in her text messages. What I discovered was 3 expensive dinners at upscale restaurants across town during the past week alone. These were places I had never heard of, with pretentious names like Cascades and Ocean Prime, the kind of establishments where appetizers cost $40 and the waiters act like they're doing you a favor by taking your order. But the real smoking gun was a hotel charge from 2 nights earlier. The Marriott downtown, $315 for 1 night. All of these expenses had been charged to our joint Visa card on dates when she had told Brianna she was going to Target or meeting up with work friends for innocent social activities. The hotel charge was the absolute smoking gun that proved everything Brianna had told me, and probably much more than she even knew. Vanessa had actually used our joint Visa card to pay for a hotel room where she was hooking up with another guy, all while asking me to wait patiently for her like some kind of backup plan. The audacity and disrespect was almost breathtaking when you really thought about it. I immediately called Tyler to update him on what I had discovered. "I found it," I told him as soon as he answered. "She's been hooking up with some guy from Orlando and I have all the evidence." "No way," Tyler responded, though he didn't sound particularly surprised. "Tell me you got screenshots of everything." "Credit card receipts, hotel charges, 3 weeks of text messages planning their hookups and talking about their amazing connection," I said. "It's all documented and backed up. She's been playing house with this Derek guy while telling me she needs space to figure out our marriage." There was a pause while Tyler processed this information. "Damn, so Brianna convinced your wife to take a break specifically so she could cheat without technically being a cheater. Then she came running to you with the information like some kind of loyal friend who was just looking out for your best interests. That's some next-level manipulation right there." Tyler was at his computer as usual, probably debugging code for his latest project. The guy worked weird hours, sometimes coding until 4 in the morning and then sleeping until noon the next day. It was one of the benefits of being good enough at your job that nobody cared when you showed up to the office, as long as the work got done on time and met the client's specifications. "What do you think Brianna's endgame is with all this?" I asked, genuinely curious about his analysis of her strategy. "She's betting that you'll be so grateful for her loyalty and so hurt by Vanessa's betrayal that you'll fall right into her arms without any resistance," Tyler explained. "It's a classic rebound strategy. She systematically destroys your marriage from the inside, then offers herself as the obvious upgrade when everything falls apart. Pretty brilliant, actually, if you're a sociopath." "Well, she's about to find out exactly how that strategy works out for her," I said grimly. I called Carter first thing Monday morning to update him on the new developments. "I have concrete evidence of adultery," I told him. "Text messages, hotel charges, restaurant receipts. Everything you could possibly need to build a solid case." "Excellent," Carter replied. "Bring everything to my office this afternoon, and we'll start preparing the divorce papers. With evidence this clear-cut, we can move quickly." Carter spent over an hour reviewing all the evidence I had collected, reading through the text message screenshots with the detached professionalism of someone who had seen this exact story play out 1,000 times before. The text messages were absolutely damning, and the financial records supported the timeline perfectly. Everything had been obtained legally since it was from shared accounts and devices that I had legitimate access to. With evidence this solid, you're looking at keeping the house as separate property, getting 60 to 65% of all joint assets, and having no spousal support obligation whatsoever, Carter explained. "Florida law is very clear about adultery. And she basically forfeited her rights when she decided to cheat during your marriage. How long will it take to prepare everything? I asked, eager to get the process moving. Give me 3 days, Carter said. I want to make sure this is absolutely airtight, so there's no room for her lawyer to maneuver or challenge anything we're doing. Those 3 days were probably among the strangest of my entire life. I went to work every day like absolutely nothing unusual was happening, managing the construction project that was finally back on schedule and coming in under budget. I came home to my quiet house each evening, ordered takeout from whatever restaurant sounded good, and watched television without anyone critiquing my entertainment choices or explaining why my preferences were problematic. Meanwhile, I kept up the devastated husband act with Brianna, letting her comfort me about the terrible news she had delivered and listening to her talk about what a terrible friend Vanessa had been to both of us. The irony of the situation was almost too much to handle sometimes. I can't believe she would do something like this to you, Brianna said during another one of our coffee meetings, shaking her head in apparent disgust. After everything you've done for her over the years, after all the ways you've supported her and provided for your life together. Exactly, I agreed, playing my part perfectly. But maybe this whole thing is happening for a reason. Maybe I needed to see who she really was underneath all the pretenses. She reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. And maybe I needed to see who you really are too, she said, gazing into my eyes with what she probably thought was meaningful intensity. Tyler nearly choked on his drink when I told him about that particular conversation later that evening. She actually said that with a completely straight face? He asked, still coughing slightly from laughing so hard. Maybe I needed to see who you really are too. What is this? Some kind of romantic comedy where everything happens for a magical reason. Next, she'll probably start talking about destiny and soulmates and how the universe brought us together through adversity, I replied, shaking my head at the absurdity of her manipulation tactics. Thursday morning arrived, and I had a professional process server deliver the divorce papers to Vanessa at her office downtown. I wanted everything done completely by the book, with no room for anyone to claim improper service or procedural errors. The papers included carefully selected excerpts from her text message conversations with Derek, as well as the financial records showing clear evidence of her affair during our supposed marriage break. Vanessa's phone call came within an hour of her being served. I was actually expecting it to happen much faster, but she probably needed some time to process what had just happened and figure out what she wanted to say to me. "What the hell is this?" she demanded as soon as I answered the phone. "Divorce papers with evidence of adultery attached? This was supposed to be a temporary break so we could work things out and save our marriage. You worked it out with Derek instead," I replied calmly. "Hope that night at the Marriott downtown was worth the $315 you charged to our joint credit card." The silence on the other end of the line was absolutely deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in her brain as she tried to figure out how I had discovered the hotel charge and what else I might know about her activities. "How did you—" she started to ask, then stopped herself before finishing the question. "Your iPad syncs to iCloud automatically," I explained matter-of-factly. "Every text message, every photo, every plan you made with Derek over the past 3 weeks. I have documentation of everything, including the voice messages you sent him." "You went through my private messages?" she asked, as if I was the one who had done something wrong in this situation. "That's a complete violation of my privacy and my trust." She tried several different angles over the course of our conversation, each one more desperate than the last. First, she claimed that the break had given her permission to explore other options. Then she insisted that she had been confused and emotionally vulnerable. Finally, she argued that she never meant for things with Derek to go as far as they had, and that it was all just a mistake born out of loneliness. None of her excuses mattered to me at that point. The evidence was clear, and the legal process was already in motion. "This is completely insane," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "It was just texting and a few dinners. You can't just end our entire marriage over something like this." "The hotel receipt says it was much more than just texting," I pointed out. "So do the restaurant charges and the 3 weeks of romantic planning sessions you had with him." There was another long silence before she responded. "You can't just end our marriage over this. We can work through it if you're willing to try." "I'm not ending our marriage," I said firmly. "You did that when you started hooking up with Derek while asking me to wait for you like some kind of backup plan in case things didn't work out with him." But her next response really showed me her true colors and confirmed that I was making the right decision. Instead of apologizing or showing any genuine remorse for what she had done, she went completely nuclear and revealed exactly what she really thought about me and our life together. "You know what? I'm glad I did it," she said, her voice full of venom and resentment. "Derek actually cares about me as a person. He doesn't just grunt at me when he gets home from work covered in dust and grease. He takes me to nice places and buys me thoughtful gifts and makes me feel special and appreciated. With our joint credit card, I pointed out. Whatever, she shot back dismissively. At least he has a real job, not just some grunt work that gets you all dirty and gross every day. At least he works in an office like a professional instead of crawling around in attics and basements like some kind of manual laborer. And there it was. 3 years of marriage, and she finally dropped the mask completely to reveal what she had really been thinking about me and my career all along. Suddenly, my HVAC work that had paid for literally everything in our life together was being dismissed as grunt work and manual labor beneath her standards. A grunt who makes twice what you make answering phones and scheduling appointments, I replied, letting my own anger show for the first time during our conversation. For now, she shot back vindictively. Derek's already talking about getting me a better position at his company in Orlando, where people actually have ambition and career goals instead of just settling for whatever paycheck they can get. Good luck with that, I said. Hope Derek knows exactly what he's signing up for when he gets involved with someone who destroys her marriage for a promotion opportunity. He appreciates me, unlike you, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. He values what I bring to a relationship instead of just taking me for granted like you've been doing for years. He appreciates having his hotel bills and restaurant tabs paid by someone else's husband, I replied. That must feel really romantic and meaningful for both of you. She hung up on me at that point, probably because she couldn't come up with a good response to the truth of what I had just said. Tyler was absolutely dying with laughter when I told him about our conversation later that evening. She actually called HVAC work grunt work? He asked, still chuckling in disbelief. The same HVAC work that's been paying her bills and funding her lifestyle for the past 3 years? And now she's planning to move to Orlando with this Derek guy so he can get her a better job, I added. Apparently, she's been wasting her potential this whole time by being married to a blue-collar worker. That woman has completely lost her mind, Tyler said, shaking his head. She threw away a marriage to a guy who owns his own house and makes good money for some middle management marketing director who drives a leased Tesla and probably lives in a condo with a mortgage he can barely afford. The divorce process ended up taking 4 months from start to finish, which Carter said was actually pretty fast, considering the complexity of dividing assets and the evidence we had to present. Vanessa tried every possible angle her lawyer could think of to get a better settlement. First, she claimed that the marriage break had given her implied permission to see other people, so technically, she hadn't been cheating. Then, when the hotel receipts and explicit text messages proved that argument wouldn't work, she tried to argue that the emotional affair hadn't become physical until after our separation. Finally, she claimed that she had been emotionally manipulated and confused by outside influences, and that she wasn't fully responsible for her actions. None of her legal strategies stuck, because evidence is evidence. And Florida divorce law is very clear about how adultery affects property division and spousal support obligations. Her lawyer was some woman who specialized in women's rights in divorce proceedings and had a reputation for being aggressive in protecting her female clients' interests. It didn't matter how skilled or experienced she was, though, because the facts of the case were indisputable and the law was on my side. But Vanessa's true nature continued to come out throughout the legal proceedings. Instead of showing any remorse for what she had done or trying to negotiate fairly for a reasonable settlement, she demanded half of everything we owned, including the house that I had bought before we were even married. When her lawyer explained that adultery would significantly affect property division and that the house was my separate property, Vanessa threw an actual tantrum right there in the law office. She started screaming about how unfair the system was and how she deserved compensation for all the years she had wasted being married to me. Her outburst was so loud and disruptive that building security had to be called, and she was temporarily banned from returning to the law firm. During this entire 4-month period, Brianna kept up her supportive friend act with absolutely military precision. She continued sending regular text messages checking on my emotional state and asking how I was handling the stress of the divorce proceedings. She made frequent suggestions that we should meet for coffee so she could provide moral support, and she dropped increasingly obvious hints about taking our friendship to the next level once my divorce was finalized and I was officially single again. The woman had turned emotional manipulation into a form of performance art. Every single text message she sent was carefully crafted to seem caring and supportive while simultaneously positioning herself as the obvious upgrade from my cheating ex-wife. She probably spent more time crafting her messages to me than most people spend writing their professional resumes. She's like a vulture circling around a dead marriage, Tyler observed one evening while we were reviewing her latest batch of messages. She probably has a countdown calendar on her wall marking the days until you're officially single and available. I continued to play along with her charade just enough to keep her engaged and interested in pursuing me. I met her for coffee twice more during the divorce proceedings, allowing her to comfort me about the legal complications and listening patiently while she talked about what a terrible person Vanessa had been to both of us. These coffee meetings followed the exact same, predictable pattern every single time. Brianna would show up dressed like she was auditioning for a music video rather than providing emotional support to a friend going through a difficult divorce. She would spend the first hour talking about how supportive and understanding she was being during this challenging time in my life. Then she would gradually transition into making increasingly obvious hints about our potential future together once all the legal drama was behind us. "I feel so guilty sometimes," she said during one particularly memorable meeting, putting on her best concerned friend expression. "If I hadn't told you about Derek and what Vanessa was doing behind your back, maybe you could have worked things out and saved your marriage." The irony of her statement was almost too much to handle, considering she had probably encouraged the affair in the first place as part of her long-term strategy to break us up. "You did the right thing by telling me," I assured her, maintaining my role as the grateful husband who appreciated her loyalty. "I needed to know the truth about what was happening, even though it was painful to hear. I just hate seeing you go through all this legal stress and emotional turmoil," she continued, reaching across the table to take my hand in what had become her signature comforting gesture. "You deserve so much better than what she put you through. And I want you to know that when you're ready, when all this divorce business is finally behind you, I'll be here for you in whatever way you need me to be." The message couldn't have been clearer if she had handed me a business card advertising Rebound Relationship Services available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a satisfaction guarantee. Tyler nearly fell off his chair when I told him about that particular conversation. "She actually said, 'In whatever way you need me to be?'" he asked, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. "What is she, a full-service consolation prize? Does she come with a warranty and a money-back guarantee?" The final divorce settlement came through in June, exactly 4 months after I had first served Vanessa with the papers. The terms were even better than Carter had originally predicted, thanks to the overwhelming evidence of her adultery and her lawyer's inability to mount any effective defense. I kept the house as my separate property, along with all of my retirement accounts and 65% of our joint assets. Vanessa got to keep her car, her personal belongings, and her student loan debt that I was no longer obligated to help pay off. There was no spousal support obligation since she was the party who had committed adultery and destroyed the marriage. The house alone was worth $320,000, with only $195,000 remaining on the mortgage balance. With all the improvements I had made over the years, I had approximately $125,000 in equity that stayed entirely mine. Plus, I received another $35,000 from our joint savings and investment accounts. When everything was calculated, Vanessa walked away with maybe $20,000 in cash and a Honda Accord with 95,000 miles on the odometer. But even during the final settlement meeting, she couldn't accept responsibility for what had happened or acknowledge that her actions had consequences. She actually had the nerve to complain that the asset division was unfair and that I was punishing her for following her heart and pursuing genuine happiness. "Following your heart?" I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "You used our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms where you were hooking up with another guy while asking me to wait around like a backup plan. Derek and I have a real emotional connection, something deep and meaningful that you would never understand," she replied, as if that somehow justified everything she had done. "I understand that your real emotional connection cost us $315 at the Marriott, plus dinner at 3 different upscale restaurants," I shot back. Her lawyer actually had to physically restrain Vanessa from lunging across the conference table at me when I said that. The woman had completely lost any semblance of self-control or dignity. It was like watching someone have a complete mental breakdown in real time. "That's what happens when you try to have your cake and eat it too," Tyler observed when I told him about the settlement meeting later. "She wanted to keep you as a safety net while she explored other options, and when that strategy backfired, she couldn't handle the consequences of her own choices." The day my divorce was officially finalized, Brianna invited me to celebrate at an upscale restaurant downtown. She had picked the location herself, Ocean View, one of those pretentious establishments where the appetizers cost $35, and the waiters treat you like you're interrupting their real career aspirations in theater or modeling. When I suggested this particular restaurant, she hesitated for just a moment, probably wondering why I suddenly wanted to wine and dine her at such an expensive place. But her ambition and greed overrode whatever instincts might have been telling her to be cautious. Brianna showed up to our dinner wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She had clearly spent hours getting ready for what she expected to be the night she finally cashed in on her months-long investment in destroying my marriage. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she was practically glowing with anticipation about how the evening was going to unfold. "I'm so proud of how you handled everything throughout this whole ordeal," she said over appetizers that looked like modern art installations and tasted like expensive disappointment. "You were so strong and dignified through the entire divorce process, even when Vanessa was being completely unreasonable and vindictive." "I had good support from people who actually cared about me," I replied, playing along with her narrative for just a little bit longer. "I was happy to help you through it," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand in her familiar gesture of false intimacy. "You deserve to know the truth about what she was doing, and I'm glad I could be there for you when everything fell apart." She leaned forward slightly, making sure I got a good view of how low-cut her dress was. "And now we can finally be completely honest about what's been building between us over these past few months. I've been waiting for the right time to tell you how I really feel." I looked at her sitting across from me in all her calculated perfection. Her designer dress, her predatory smile that she had probably practiced in the mirror, her complete confidence that she was about to get everything she had been working toward. And I felt nothing but pure disgust for what she represented. "Brianna, there's something I need to tell you," I said, setting down my fork and looking directly into her eyes. "What is it?" she asked, probably expecting some kind of romantic declaration or expression of gratitude for her loyalty. "You destroyed my marriage," I said simply and clearly. "What?" "No, that's not what happened at all," she replied, her confident expression faltering for the first time since I had known her. "I helped you see what Vanessa really was underneath all the pretenses. I protected you from getting hurt even worse than you already were. You were trying to break us up from the very beginning so you could move in on me," I continued, watching her face go pale underneath all that expensive foundation. "You encouraged her to cheat, then came running to me with the information like some kind of loyal friend who was just looking out for my best interests." For the first time since I had met her, Brianna looked genuinely surprised and off balance. She had clearly never considered the possibility that I might see through her manipulation, or that her elaborate scheme might not work exactly as planned. "That's not true," she protested weakly. "I would never do something like that. I cared about both of you, and I was just trying to protect you from getting hurt worse when the truth eventually came out." "You were protecting your own interests," I said firmly. "You saw an opportunity to get what you wanted, and you took it without caring about the damage you caused to other people's lives." I stood up from the table and dropped two $20 bills next to my plate. "The saddest part is that you actually think I would want to be with someone who is capable of doing what you did. You think I'd want to build a relationship with someone who destroys other people's marriages for her own entertainment and benefit." "Where are you going?" she asked, panic starting to creep into her voice. "We haven't even ordered our main courses yet. I thought we were going to talk about our future together." "I'm going home alone to my house that I kept because I was smart enough not to trust people like you," I replied, looking down at her still sitting there in her expensive dress and finally understanding that her elaborate manipulation had gotten her exactly nothing. "What about us?" she asked desperately. "What about everything we've built together over these past few months?" I looked down at her one final time, watching her realize that all of her careful planning and manipulation had been for absolutely nothing. "There is no us, and there never was," I said clearly. "You're a toxic person who destroys other people's relationships for your own entertainment. That's not someone I would ever want to be involved with." "But I helped you," she said, grasping at straws. "I told you the truth about what Vanessa was doing. I was loyal to you when she wasn't." "You told me the truth about an affair that you encouraged her to have in the first place," I replied. "You created the problem, then offered yourself as the solution. That's not help. That's sabotage with a marketing campaign attached to it." But I wasn't quite done yet, because I had one final card to play that would make this evening truly memorable for both of the women who had worked so hard to destroy my marriage. About an hour earlier, I had sent a text message to Vanessa that said, "Brianna wants to confess something important about Derek. She said it's really important and you need to hear it tonight." Vanessa had taken the bait instantly, responding within minutes that she would be there. "What's she doing here?" Brianna's voice went up an entire octave when she spotted Vanessa walking through the restaurant's front entrance, her eyes already scanning the room for signs of drama. "Ladies, you two have a lot to discuss with each other," I said calmly. "I'll leave you both to work things out." I stood up from the table and started walking toward the exit, but not before pulling out my phone to call Tyler. Dude, you need to get down to Ocean View Restaurant right now, I told him as soon as he answered. What's happening? Tyler asked, and I could hear him already reaching for his car keys. The life coach is about to get a comprehensive performance review from her former client, I replied. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. I could hear Vanessa's voice rising behind me as I made my way toward the parking lot. You set me up with Derek, she was yelling at Brianna. You manipulated me into having an affair. It wasn't like that at all, Brianna protested loudly. I was trying to help you see what you really wanted. I was being a good friend. Help me? Vanessa's voice got even louder. You destroyed my marriage so you could steal my husband. You've been planning this for months. I made it to the parking lot just as things were getting really interesting inside the restaurant. Through the large windows, I could see both women standing up from their table now, gesturing wildly at each other while other diners started turning around to watch the show unfold. Several people were already pulling out their phones to record what was clearly about to become an epic public meltdown. Tyler pulled up in his truck just as the real entertainment was beginning. Holy crap, they're really going at it in there, he said, getting out of his vehicle and joining me to watch the spectacle through the restaurant windows. This is better than anything you could pay to see on pay-per-view. Vanessa's voice carried clearly through the glass as she continued her assault on Brianna. You've been planning this whole thing for months. He doesn't even want you. He just rejected you completely, you delusional psychopath. He just rejected you too, Brianna shot back. At least I was loyal to him. At least I didn't cheat on him with some random guy from Orlando. That's when Brianna apparently decided to escalate things to the next level. I watched through the window as she picked up something from the table. It looked like her water glass, and hurled it in Vanessa's direction. The glass shattered against the wall behind Vanessa, sending water and glass fragments everywhere. Vanessa responded to this attack by grabbing Brianna's designer purse from the table and dumping the entire contents all over their dinner plates and the white tablecloth. Makeup, credit cards, car keys, and what looked like about 50 different lip products scattered across the table and onto the floor. Oh, this is getting really good now, Tyler said, already pulling out his phone to call 911. Hello, police. I'd like to report a disturbance at Ocean View Restaurant downtown. 2 women are having some kind of fight and throwing things at each other. Through the window, we watched Brianna lunge across the table at Vanessa, with her perfectly manicured nails extended like claws. Vanessa grabbed her by her expensively styled hair, and they both went down hard, taking half the table setting with them in the process. Plates, glasses, silverware, and food crashed to the floor as other restaurant patrons scrambled to get away from their table. Should we go in there and try to help break it up? I asked Tyler, though I was pretty sure I already knew what his answer would be. Help? Tyler replied, never taking his eyes off the chaos unfolding inside. Dude, this is the best entertainment I've had all year. They're both getting exactly what they deserve for what they did to you. The restaurant manager appeared on the scene, trying to separate the 2 women who were now rolling around on the floor among the broken dishes and spilled food. But Brianna shoved him away with surprising force and went after Vanessa again, apparently not ready to let this fight end quite yet. Vanessa responded by grabbing what looked like the bread basket from a nearby table and throwing it directly at Brianna's face. The basket caught her square in the nose, and the rolls scattered across the dining room floor as other customers continued filming the entire spectacle with their smartphones. By the time the police officers arrived about 5 minutes later, both women were still on the floor of the restaurant. Their hair was completely disheveled. Their makeup was smeared beyond recognition, and they were still screaming accusations at each other while the restaurant staff tried desperately to restore some kind of order to the chaos. Both police officers looked at each other with the weary expression of people who had dealt with this exact type of situation many times before in their careers. They surveyed the scene of broken glass, scattered food, overturned furniture, and 2 grown women still hurling insults at each other from opposite sides of the dining room. Ladies, you're both under arrest for disturbing the peace and assault, the first officer announced in a tone that suggested he had absolutely no patience for whatever drama had led to this public spectacle. Tyler and I continued watching from the parking lot as the officers handcuffed both women and loaded them into separate patrol cars. Even through the closed car windows, we could see them still yelling at each other, their faces pressed against the glass as they continued their argument from their respective back seats. They both ended up spending the night in county holding, apparently because screaming in public and hurling dinnerware at each other isn't covered under the legal definition of normal girl drama. The charges included disturbing the peace, assault, and destruction of private property. That, Tyler said with obvious satisfaction as we watched the patrol cars drive away, was absolutely beautiful, like watching karma deliver justice in real time. I got a phone call the next morning from Vanessa, who was calling me from the county jail using her one allowed phone call. "This is all your fault," she said immediately, without even bothering to say hello first. "How exactly is your restaurant brawl with Brianna my fault?" I asked, genuinely curious about her logic. "You set us up," she accused. "You planned this whole thing. You knew exactly what would happen when you got us both in the same place." I told her the truth about what she did to our marriage, I replied calmly. "What you two decided to do after that revelation was entirely your own choice. We both got arrested because of your manipulation," she continued, as if I had somehow forced them to throw things at each other in a public restaurant. "You both got arrested because you decided to have a cage match in the middle of an upscale dining establishment," I pointed out. "That's entirely on both of you, not on me." But even from jail, Vanessa wasn't done feeling entitled to my help and support. "You need to bail me out of here," she demanded. "I'm still your wife, and I don't have anyone else to call." "Ex-wife as of yesterday, actually," I corrected her. "And no, I don't need to do anything for you anymore." "I don't have anyone else to call," she repeated desperately. "Derek won't answer his phone and my parents are out of town." "Sounds like a personal problem that you'll need to figure out on your own," I replied. "You can't just leave me here," she said, her voice taking on a whining quality that I found particularly unattractive. "Watch me," I said and hung up the phone. The entire phone conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes before she hung up on me in frustration. Tyler was absolutely dying with laughter when I told him about it later that evening. "That woman has incredible nerve, I'll give her that," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "She destroys her marriage, gets into a public fight with her accomplice, gets arrested for disturbing the peace, and then expects you to bail her out like nothing happened." Both women ended up spending the full night in jail and had to pay substantial fines for disturbing the peace when they appeared before the judge the next morning. Vanessa also had to pay for all the damaged restaurant property, which came to approximately $900 for broken dishes, glassware, ruined tablecloths, and professional cleaning fees to get food stains out of the carpet. The incident ended up making it onto several social media platforms as divorce drama turns into epic restaurant brawl. Someone who had been dining at the restaurant that night had filmed the entire fight on their phone and posted it to TikTok with the caption, "When keeping it real goes horribly wrong." The video got over 95,000 views in the first week alone. One of the top comments on the video read, "When you try to steal someone's husband but end up in jail with his ex-wife instead," and it had accumulated over 600 likes from viewers who appreciated the ironic justice of the situation. Vanessa ended up moving back in with her parents in suburban Jacksonville after the arrest incident. The last I heard, she was working at a different company making roughly the same salary she had been earning before. But now, she had the added benefits of a criminal record and a viral video documenting her public meltdown. Derek apparently ended things with her immediately once he realized that he had been used as a pawn to break up someone else's marriage, and then publicly humiliated when the whole scheme backfired spectacularly. The guy went from thinking he was some kind of sophisticated player to needing building security to keep his ex-affair partner from showing up at his Orlando office trying to salvage their deep emotional connection. The funniest part of the whole Derek situation was that he apparently tried to ghost Vanessa completely after the arrest incident made local news. But she kept showing up at his office building in Orlando, trying to convince him that they could work things out and that their relationship was worth fighting for. His company eventually had to involve building security and threaten her with a trespassing charge if she didn't stop harassing him at his workplace. The guy went from thinking he was some kind of smooth operator who had stolen another man's wife to desperately needing a restraining order to keep his former affair partner from stalking him at work. It was a complete reversal of power that must have been humiliating for both of them. Brianna tried reaching out to me for weeks after the arrest incident, alternating between pathetic apologies and angry accusations depending on her mood that particular day. Her messages started with humble approaches like, "I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me at the restaurant," and "I never meant for things to get so out of hand." But when those tactics didn't work and I didn't respond to her attempts at reconciliation, her tone gradually escalated to more aggressive accusations. She began sending messages like, "You manipulated both of us and destroyed 2 friendships," and "You're a sociopath who planned this whole thing from the beginning." I finally had to block her phone number completely when she showed up at my house uninvited one Saturday morning, demanding to know why I was punishing her for being what she called a good friend who was just trying to help. She stood on my front porch for 20 minutes, ringing the doorbell repeatedly and shouting about how unfair I was being to her. The house feels like an actual home again now that all the toxic people have been removed from my life. I got rid of all those decorative pillows that served no functional purpose except taking up space on the furniture. I threw out the scented candles that were never allowed to be lit because they might create too strong a fragrance in the living areas. I bought myself a proper sectional couch that's actually comfortable to sit on. And I installed a 70-inch television in the living room for watching sports and movies. I also converted the spare bedroom into a proper home office where I can work on project plans and manage my business paperwork without anyone complaining about the mess of having important documents spread out on a desk. As Tyler likes to say, trash really does take itself out sometimes if you're patient enough to let it happen naturally. Tyler comes over every weekend now, and we can watch entire football games without anyone explaining why sports represent toxic masculinity in modern society. We can eat whatever we want for dinner without having to endure lectures about nutritional balance and the psychological implications of our food choices. We can work on projects in my garage workshop without someone complaining about the noise or questioning why I need so many different types of tools. The construction project I was working on during all this relationship drama actually ended up being completed ahead of schedule and significantly under budget. It turns out that when you're not dealing with manufactured relationship crises at home every single evening, you can actually focus on your career and do your best work. The successful completion of that project led to a promotion and a substantial raise that increased my annual income by about 15%. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I'm making more money than I ever have in my life. I've paid the mortgage down to only $170,000 remaining balance, which means I have substantial equity built up in my property. I'm casually dating someone new who actually appreciates what I do for work instead of calling it grunt labor. And most importantly, I've learned to recognize red flags from a considerable distance. The whole experience taught me that some people will systematically destroy everything good in their lives just to create drama and feel important. Vanessa wanted excitement and conflict more than she wanted stability and partnership. Brianna wanted to possess someone else's life more than she wanted to build something meaningful of her own. Both of them ended up getting exactly what they deserved as a result of their choices. Tyler summed up the entire situation perfectly during one of our weekend hangouts while we were grilling burgers and watching the game. "You dodged 2 bullets at the same time," he said, taking a sip of his beer. "One that was already married to you and actively trying to destroy your life, and another one that desperately wanted to be married to you so she could destroy your life in different ways. Now you get to start over completely fresh with someone who isn't completely insane," he continued. "Someone who appreciates what you bring to a relationship instead of constantly trying to change you into something you're not." The best part about this whole experience is that I never had to compromise who I was or beg anyone to appreciate me. I didn't have to chase after someone who was clearly not interested in building a life together. I just had to be patient and let the toxic people in my life show their true colors naturally. Sometimes the garbage really does take itself out if you give it enough time and space to reveal what it actually is. And that TikTok video of their restaurant fight? It's still getting new comments and reactions every single week, even months after the original incident. My personal favorite comment, which has accumulated over 1,200 likes from viewers, reads, "When you try to steal someone's husband but end up in jail with his ex-wife instead. That's what we call instant karma." The video has been shared, remixed, and turned into memes across multiple social media platforms. Someone even created a version with cartoon sound effects and animated graphics that's somehow even funnier than the original footage of 2 grown women destroying a restaurant over their failed manipulation schemes. Life is genuinely good when you're not constantly dealing with manipulative people who create problems for their own entertainment. My house is quiet and peaceful when I want it to be, but it's also full of friends and laughter when I choose to have people over. My bank account continues to grow steadily every month, and my weekends are entirely my own to spend however I see fit. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong in a relationship, instead of trying to rationalize away obvious red flags because I want to believe the best about people. I know now that when someone shows you who they really are through their actions, you should believe them the first time instead of making excuses for their behavior. The house renovations I did during my marriage turned out to be one of the smartest investments I ever made. The property value has continued to increase as the neighborhood gentrifies, and I have a comfortable, functional living space that reflects my actual needs and preferences rather than someone else's ideas about how I should live. I changed all the locks on the house just in case either of my former problems ever gets any bright ideas about making an unwelcome return visit. But honestly, I don't think I need to worry about that. Vanessa is too busy dealing with the consequences of her choices, and Brianna has probably moved on to targeting some other unsuspecting married man with her home-wrecking strategies. Tyler and I have started a tradition of watching the TikTok video every few months when we need a good laugh. It never gets old seeing two people who thought they were so clever and manipulative end up handcuffed in the back of police cars because they couldn't control their own emotions long enough to avoid creating a public spectacle. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that the best decision I made was refusing to fight for someone who was testing me instead of working with me. When someone asks you to prove your love through panic and desperation, the correct response is to walk away with your dignity intact. Real love doesn't require manufactured drama or artificial tests to prove its authenticity. I couldn't have asked for a better ending to this whole situation. The manipulative people removed themselves from my life, I kept everything that mattered to me, and I learned valuable lessons about recognizing and avoiding toxic relationships in the future. Sometimes the universe really does have a sense of humor about delivering justice to people who think they're smarter than everyone else.